Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and today I am going to discuss and analyze the Zodiac Killer. It's a tough case because it's never been solved. I think they said there's 2,500 suspects. Everybody's got a different one. There's a lot of confusion over the case, so it's not an easy one to deal with. So, I want to welcome everybody who's in the chat room. My goodness, it is a pretty full chat room, and I know people are coming in by the minute. There's Lisa, Marie, Lauren, Rachel, VLW. Let's say, I say Lisa. Nina's here, Gretchen's here, Juniper's here, Emily is here. Molly was going to be here, but you can't. If I didn't say your name, I'm sorry, and I know you're going to be coming in little by little. Before I start, I want to make this statement. I burnt my mouth on coffee this morning, and I have a really fat lip. And so, for all you haters, no, I'm not drunk. If I can't pronounce my words properly, it's because my lips is so swollen, it's hard to actually talk. But I'm here, and the show goes on. So, yeah, and it is such an interesting series of crimes. One of the most, I think, unique in the history of serial killings. And I think it beats out the Boston Strangler. I think it actually beats out Jack the Ripper. I think Zodiac is probably the most bizarre, unique set of serial homicides I have run into, which is why people can't let it go. But before I continue on, I do also want to say, if you'd like to be in the chat room, please join Patreon. It's $5 a month. You get to come to all the lives where you don't see advertisements if you're not paying to get rid of them. And you get to participate in our community, and it does help support the channel. But please do also like and subscribe to the channel. That helps greatly. Check the playlist. I can't say this enough. Check the playlist for the cases you're interested in, okay? Because they're there. Or you can go to Google, the search on YouTube, and put in Profiler Pat Brown in the case you're interested in, and find what you might find I've already done that case, and it's really important that you get to see it and not think I didn't do it. You can also support the channel by buying one of my books below, or hitting the little dollar sign, and keeping this educational channel going. And again, I want to say, as I always do, this is an educational channel. So I do this live. I do it without editing, so you can understand thought processes, so you can see, how I analyze things. It's somebody wrote the other day, it's like, wow, can you tighten it up, Pat? They called me befuddled. Thanks. Because I do things live, and I've got a lot of information, and sometimes I lose things in the looking for stuff, and that's a real show. If I did a very concise, perfect show, I would probably put in hundreds of hours and have a staff. I don't have that, so I do this, and I like doing it this way, and I would not want to do it the other way. I don't like editing. I want to just be here with you guys and have you see what I have to say. So, befuddled though I may be, I will carry on. All right, so Zodiac. I'm going to start in this particular case with a commentary, which I think is very, very important. And it comes from is a guy named Kim Rossmo. And Kim Rossmo, he does geographical profiling. Very interesting stuff, I will say. This is him. His name is Dr. Kim Rossmo. He's a research professor. I didn't realize he was at Texas State University these days, but okay. He does geographical profiling. Some of it is very statistical and analytical, and I find it sometimes too much and too unlikely that this kind of statistics are going to prove something. However, he also has some really just great stuff about the general concept of understanding people work within geographical areas. And the Zodiac did that. I believe he was in California. We don't know that he left California, but his first two crimes, specifically in Vallejo, I believe that's where he lived. And because serial killers usually start their crimes right near their homes, or right near where they work, because they know the area. And then after that, they sometimes spread out because they don't want to get caught, or because they want to go into other police jurisdictions so that they won't cooperate with each other and the information will get lost. But generally speaking, they start where they live. And so geographical profiling is fascinating. So Kim Rossmo has done a lot of studies on that. And, so I highly recommend you look into some of that. Some of it I say I don't understand because it gets to some very analytical, statistical things that that's not really my thing. But I respect him and what he has to say. What does he have to say about this case? And I want to point this out up front. Dr. Rossmo said something really good. Oh, let me tell you before I go on, let me just tell you where I got my major information from, because I did get his information from a particular location. These were the my three main pieces. Well, first I saw this. Let me put it this way. First I saw the movie, because I saw the movie a long time ago and really liked it. It's a little exaggerated, but a good, interesting movie on Zodiac. And it's based on the book Zodiac, which I have right here, which I read and did all my notes in. And it was written by Robert Graysmith. And he was a reporter, a journalist, and he got super involved in this case when it was happening and pretty much got sucked in to the rabbit hole and never came back out. But he did well for himself, because he wrote a book which sold great numbers of, and he got optioned for a movie. So the guy's rich, if nothing else. No, he does a good job. I'm just kidding. I think he did an excellent job of describing an awful lot of stuff. And I want to point out what I appreciate, because I just did a thing on Sandra Lean's book on the Jody Jones murder, and Luke Mitchell, who she is defending in her book called Innocence Betrayed. And one of my complaints was that she had no sources. She just said stuff, and you really don't know where things come from. And I've seen other books like this, but this guy, he has all the appendix back here. Is appendices? Appendices? I don't even know how you pronounce it. And he has a whole thing on descriptions of Zodiac, and then he has a thing on all the possible cars, and then he's got all these specific details at the back of the book, and he's got a very, very nice, thank God. You can get back here and you can actually, in the index, look up stuff, which is frustrating when you can't do that and you can't find anything within a book. So I appreciate the amount of work that went into the details of this book. So I read that book, watched this movie, and behind me is this particular show, and it's called This Was Alan Leigh Allen. The link is below, and it's actually very fascinating. Arthur Leigh Allen was the number one suspect in this case. And this is a documentary that's done in I like it because there's no dramatic music and a whole bunch of crap. There's people just saying their piece, and it's fascinating. And Kim Rossmo was in this documentary, which is why I wanted to bring this up. So these are the basic three sources I had, along with all the stuff on the internet. And so let's go to Kim Rossmo and what he said. All right, Kim Rossmo said basically this, and I thought it was brilliant, so I want to bring it to you. He said a lot of the problems with this case, as in many cases, is that instead of looking at the evidence and developing suspects, you find suspects and then try to match them to evidence. And in this case, in Zodiac, what people do is if you get to a suspect's life, you can run through his life and look for any tiniest little connection and say, oh, see, that makes him Zodiac. Let me give you an example. I wrote the book, the Murder of Cleopatra. I did a discovery documentary called The Mysterious Death of Cleopatra. I've been to Egypt twice, and I'm now doing a series on this on my channel called The Murder of Cleopatra. It's going to be a 10-part series, and I'm up to, I think I've done the introduction in two parts so far, and the next part will be coming up, hopefully this week. So I consider myself an expert on Cleopatra. And why am I an expert? Why was I drawn to Cleopatra? Well, I'm going to tell you. I happen to be a Leo. I just want to let you know. I was born in July, the end of July, so I'm a Leo. And if you look at Cleopatra's name, right in the middle, it says Leopat. Leopat, Cleopatra. I think I'm a reincarnation of Cleopatra. And there's other things that prove this. First of all, my fascination, I just was drawn to this, and my name is in the middle. And also, in my life, I've owned a black cat, a black cat like they have, all the gods and goddesses of Egypt and all of uh, I don't know what you call it in Egypt. I'm thinking of India. It's called Murtis. The statues that they have there that they worship. There's a cat god, you see, and I had a black cat just like this, and I moved to Washington D.C. Yes, I did. And guess what they got in Washington D.C.? Oh my God, they've got an obelisk. It's called the Washington Monument. So we see right now, without me even working at it, 3 connections that I have to Cleopatra. Of course, you're all sitting there going, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Of course it is. It is ridiculous. But in cases where the cases become famous, if you take anybody, you can go through their entire history and you will find things that overlap. Like they worked at the same location as one of the victims. It could be like a hospital with 10,000 employees or whatever. But they were there and the other person was there too. And then you could say they lived near them, or you could say they had a similar hobby, or you could say whatever. But if you look hard enough, you can find often 20 things that will look like they connect to the case, to the victim, or to the evidence. And that's how people get carried away and go down rabbit holes that they shouldn't be going down. So I want to point that out at the beginning so that you understand that this is one of those cases where, because so much time has passed, and there are people who spend incredible amounts of time looking at every detail of somebody's life and trying to find a way to connect it. And just recently, there's a new suspect. It actually came out in 2018, but it just popped up like a day or two ago. A new suspect in this particular case. And I'm going to get to that. But the way they're connecting him to the case is so ridiculous. And it's just laughable. And this shows you, I'll show you how bad it is when we get to the suspect. But I want you to understand this before we go into the case, that we have to be careful that we don't connect dots that aren't really dots. Now, however, I will also say this. When you're investigating a case and you find a person has lived near someone, or they have a similar hobby, or they work at a similar location, you do have to look at them. So on that hand, I will say a good investigator can't ignore it either. So you have to be rational. Could this be a link, or is this just coincidental? Now, at certain points, you'd say sometimes, there's too many coincidences for the whole thing to be coincidental. And then you go, this person's like moving up in the suspect list. But even then, you have to have proof to get to the point of being able to arrest the guy with probable cause and then take him to court and convict him. So this case is full of all kinds of suspects and connections. And so I'm going to also point out a lot of the things that I think we don't know the actual truth of. So therefore, sometimes we may be relying on misinformation, like witness information, details that we aren't sure about, and therefore we can't actually come to a conclusion. So I just want to point that out to start, because I think that's important for us to understand when we're looking at anything. I also want to point out that this is a YouTube show, and I have not been studying. I'm not a Zodiac Killer groupie. I haven't been running a website for 20 years just on the Zodiac. So I always get these people that come in and go, well, did you read this book? Did you look at this? I'm like, no, this is no, because I haven't spent my entire life doing this, because I don't live in the basement of my mother's house. So also, I'm not writing a book now, or going to work for a documentary. Now, if somebody wants to give me if one of the publishers out there wants to give me $100,000 advance, I will spend every moment of my life studying Zodiac. But I don't get that kind of, if nobody's offering me that, I can't do that. So I have to examine what I can see in a reasonable amount of time and help you understand what I I can teach what I can teach about how I would analyze this, what I see as important information, who I think is a more likely suspect than not. But no, I haven't spent 10,000 hours on this case, and unless you're paying me, I don't intend to. So, all right, I'm going to go to the basics of the case. I'll just check in on your comments before I continue. See what you have to say, and I'll move to that. Oh, that's interesting. Bree says, my friend's dad was a writer on the Zodiac movie and has had his theory. During his research, he approached one of the suspects. From that day on, he and his family were harassed by an anonymous phone caller. And we have, in this case, Bree, we do have this guy who seems to be calling up certain families and journalists and doing heavy breathing. Do we know it's Zodiac? We don't. Is it possible it is? Yes. Is it possible it's just some freak? Yes. Hard to say. Absolutely hard to say. They had a police car assigned to the house for several months. Zodiac was scary enough that anybody who worked on this case often felt like this guy could just show up and shoot them all down, stab them all to death, because he was very unpredictable. Okay, so that's going to be part of what I'm going to talk about in my analysis, my profile of him, that his methodologies were kind of strange in the world of serial homicide. So you're a Leo too, but you're Leo Marie, so you're not Cleopatra. I'm gaslighting you. Yeah, sure. Okay. Oh, thank you. Bastet. That is correct. Okay. I want to point this out about the befuddled thing, because a lot of times I can't remember names, and it's not due to Alzheimer's or drinking too much. It's the fact that when you're dealing with so much stuff on the fly, live, sometimes you just cannot freaking remember. Bastet. That's correct. That's the cat. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sphinx. No, that's not the Sphinx. It's the Bastet. Yeah. Laughing about the black cat. If you're ever in the Pacific Northwest, you got to let me buy you a coffee or a tequila. I'm not allowed to, because I can't do this when I do my shows. No, and have a good chat. I was out in the Pacific Northwest. You missed me. Oh, man. This is true. A good example of how you can find clues everywhere if you want to. Yes, and you have to be very careful of that, because once you start doing that, you throw your whole investigation completely off. It's mostly I would say more armchair profiles than the detectives on the case. I once did an example, which was kind of fascinating to me. I was looking at a fellow who I believe committed a sexual homicide. And he had some interesting connections to other cases in the area, because as I've always pointed out, a serial killer is a serial killer. You don't commit it. In this case, Zodiac's he did not commit sexual homicides, but the majority of serial killers do. So, if you find a woman who's been raped and murdered in the bushes, generally speaking, that guy is a serial killer, and he's going to go on and do more. So I had a suspect. I kept looking for other crimes. One of the things I did to test myself was pick crimes that I know he did not commit and see if I could link him to them, work overtime to link him. And I was unable to do that, which was at least relieving to me, that I wasn't just making up a whole bunch of crap in my head. The crimes I thought he had connections to had good links, but I picked out a whole bunch of others in the area, and I could never come up with anything. So you always just have to keep it in mind. As an investigator, you have to look at possible links with suspects, but you also have to understand that sometimes it is just a coincidence. So, all right. So now let me tell you the basics of the crimes if you've never experienced Zodiac before. Yes, Wikipedia. Sorry, it's the easiest thing to use. The confirmed murders. Although the Zodiac claimed in letters to newspapers to have committed 37 murders, and we have a lot of serial killers who do this, by the way. They were caught for like 12, but they claim they did 80. And a lot of times the police are perfectly willing to link him to other crimes so they can close the cases down and not have to worry about them anymore. So it's kind of a popular thing for serial killers to do, to say they committed more than they did. In reality, serial homicides are exhausting. The effort it takes to commit this kind of crime, to not leave evidence and to not be caught, and just the physical part of committing the crimes is a lot of work. So a lot of times serial killers don't kill as often as people think. Some just wait years in between. Maybe they only committed like 6 serial homicides in their life. But they'll claim 80. There are those who are more prolific, but you can't believe them because they're serial killers and they're liars and they're pathological liars. So be a little careful on that. But anyway, he claimed to have committed 37 murders. Investigators agree on 7 confirmed assault victims, 5 of whom died and 2 that survived. All right, who were these people? All right, the first crime was this couple, David Faraday, 17 years old, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16 years old. They were shot and killed on December 20th, 1968 on Lake Herman Road within the city limits of, I don't know what that is, Benicia. So they were the first couple killed. He did not claim, Zodiac did not claim the murders right away like he did later. But after the second couple murdered, he said, oh, by the way, I did the other couple. And he had enough information to make it believable. The next couple was Darlene Ferrin and Michael, I can't pronounce his name, Majot. Sorry, I don't watch enough of these shows to actually get the names down. I would say Majot, but who knows? They were shot on July 4th, 1969 in the parking lot of Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo. He survived the attack. She was pronounced dead when she got to the hospital. So that was the second couple. And after that, the guy called in and said, oh, yeah, by the way, this double murder that I just committed, it's over there. Go find them. And by the way, the other one, I did too. Then the third couple was this couple. This was Cecilia Ann Shepard. She was 22. Brian Hartnell, he was 20. They were stabbed on September 27th, 1969 at a place called Lake Berryessa. Lake Berryessa looks like this. Pretty place and kind of dry outside, but a lovely place. People picnicked and hung out there. It was lovely. In Napa County, Hartnell survived, but Shepard died as a result of her injuries, like the other crime. Both the men survived. The women were much more, they were focused on much more. And I'm going to bring this up in my analysis. Why did he overkill on the females, but not so much on the males? Both males survived, which also meant he didn't pay much attention to whether they were dead before he left, which I find fascinating because personally, if I'm a serial killer, I want to make sure I don't have witnesses. I'm going to make sure the guy is dead. This guy, and he didn't. So that's kind of interesting. The last one that is believed to be his is Paul Lee Stein. He was a taxi driver. He was 29 years old, shot and killed in Presidio Heights in the neighborhood of San Francisco. He gave a ride to somebody who then shot him in the head, and he became the fifth one. And after that crime, the killer sent not only a letter about that crime, but also he had ripped part of his shirt off and sent pieces to the newspapers. Some people think that he is not a Zodiac victim, but I have a problem with that because of the fact that parts of his shirt were sent in to the journalists and to the newspapers. If one would think they know what his shirt looks like, the police should know what the rest of his shirt looks like. So if you're going to put the shirt pieces together, it should be the same shirt. So I don't know how that it would not be the Zodiac. So there's reasons I know people think that, but I don't know. The shirt thing, I can't get past that unless they literally couldn't tell the difference between the types of shirts they were. Like this was a blue shirt and rayon, and the guy sent in a white shirt and cotton. It had to obviously be the same shirt. At least one would think. So do I think he's a Zodiac victim? Yes, because of that. There is a fourth crime, which happened a number of years before. I think it was 4 years before. That is it's argumented whether whether she was a victim or not. Sherry Josephine Bates. She was age 17. She was a student. She came out of her class and found her car disabled, and somebody offered a ride, and then they stabbed the living crap out of her and dumped her body. And then the guy wrote a letter. Like the Zodiac wrote many, many letters to the newspaper. And this crime, the guy who killed this woman also wrote a letter, which was quite unusual. He wrote this confession. She was young and beautiful, but now she is battered and dead. She is not the first, and she will not be the last. And he goes on. He's quite prolific. And so it is so unusual for somebody to write a letter to anyone, the journalists, the police, after they've committed a crime. I can tell you, in all the serial homicides out there, almost nobody contacts law enforcement or the newspapers. Why? Because everybody seems to think that, oh my God, they want to be that this is what they do. They like to play cat and mouse with the police. No, they don't. They want to get away with it because most serial killers love the moment of killing. They like the raping. They like the power. They like watching the life go out of the eyes of the victim, like a Ted Bundy. They don't want to warn the police or the journalists and play all these kind of games with them because it interferes with them committing their crimes. And they don't, quite frankly, a lot of times just don't care about the rest of the world. They just want to commit the crimes. The majority are that way. This is such a unique thing that the Zodiac did send a ton of letters. So the fact that there was a crime before he started his continuous contact with the journalists, that there was another crime, that she was stabbed to death in a brutal way. And then he sent this long, very long letter about how he enjoyed doing it and what he was doing and how he did it, proving he was the one that committed the crime. Zodiac always wanted to prove he committed crimes. Hey, it was me. He didn't want somebody else getting credit. He's like, hey, it's me. And he gave details about the crime so that you would believe that it was him, that he wasn't gaslighting. And you have this earlier crime 4 years before where a guy did the exact same thing. Not a highly publicized crime, though. So that crime, many think, and the police think in that area, that he did not, the guy who did that crime was not Zodiac. There are other people who think it could well be Zodiac. So that's the basic crimes. Now, mind you, he suddenly stopped sending letters and claiming crimes. So what happened to him? Did he die? Did he end up in prison? Was he in an insane asylum? Or was he committing all the crimes that he claimed he would do and not write letters anymore? Was he just a normal serial killer and getting a kick out of the crimes? Was he still out there? And there's a lot that if you go to many of these sites, and the possible crime list is really, really long. Like, they never solved this one. They never solved that one. Could have been Zodiac. And so it goes on and on and on. So, but those are the basic crimes that he committed at that particular point in time. Let me say here. Marie says, did he contact them because he already had been killing for a while and was getting too brave? I think this is Danglish. Danish English? Okay. But I hope you understand. Absolutely. It is possible because remember, the first one that is absolutely attributed to him, which is David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, they're the teenagers. They were the first ones as a couple. He did not immediately call the police and say, hey, look what I did. There's a couple murdered. He didn't do that on that crime, nor did he send a letter. He didn't do that till his second crime, which was how much later? So the first double homicide was December 20th, 1968. The second one was July 4th, 1969. 6 months had passed. So he did do a crime without looking for attention on it. Then the second double murder, he did look for attention. So to your question, could he decide that, well, killing is amusing, but I'm not getting enough attention for this, because the police are not reporting all the cool parts about the crime and who I am. It's just kind of boring. So I'm just going to now step it up a level. Yes, that is possible. Now, if you include the earlier crime of Sherry, which was like a few years before, I think it was like 4 years before, that one, there was a letter written. Did he write a letter once and it didn't go over well, and so the next he went on his way and then killed another couple and didn't do anything about it, but then thought, okay, I'm going to try again, maybe. Or was this two separate people? Did one guy write this letter, and who the heck is this guy, and why did he not continue killing a lot of women, or did he? And then a second guy came up and decided to do something similar. See, it gets really tricky. It really does. And this is why the rabbit hole is so deep in this case and why so many people go down it. I'm not willing without that $100,000 advance. So no. So those are the ones that are basic. Now, before I get to the suspects, I just want to do a quick profile of the guy. Very unique. I mean, absolutely extremely unique. And most serial killers are so boring. And people are like, aren't you fascinated? I'm like, no, not really. They all seem very similar to me. You jump out of a bush, you rape a girl, you hit her over the head, you strangle her. You crawl through a window, same thing. Zodiac was different because I don't think he was really a serial killer in the sense that he's more like a mass murderer with the crimes separated. There was no sexual assault on any of the crimes, which I'm not saying you can't be a serial killer without the sexual assault. You can. And some profilers will say this, what I think is absolute nonsense, is like, well, the only way he gets his sexual thrills is by making the women an object and then killing them, and that's how he gets off. It's very psychobabble crap. Everything isn't about sex. It's about power and control. Sex is often used by serial killers as a method of power and control. They get off on the power and control they get out of sex, which you can have power and control without any sex. And quite frankly, you never even thought about sex. So it is not expression of sexuality. It's an expression of power and control. And this guy had no interest in sexually assaulting the women. Now, mind you, in the one early case of Sherry, he did mention that he touched, her boob was warm and he might go and kill other women, but he didn't actually sexually assault her. She was still completely clothed, which is interesting again. Why is he even saying that? Is he just doing that to scare people or to make people think he's that kind of guy? Again, could he be Zodiac because he actually wasn't, quite frankly, interested in rape as a methodology of getting power and control? So Zodiac is in his killings. That was not what he was about. Now, interestingly, he did seem to go on overkill on the women and not so much on the men. Do I think he had an issue with women? Yes, I do. I think he had a level of frustration and hatred with women, whether it be the females in his life, like his mom, because we do see some serial killers have this, they've grown up with a mom who they feel didn't do but right by them, or they just they disparage in some way. And so some women just to them are evil, essentially, and awful and cause problems in my life. Or he couldn't get a date. It could be an incel who could just never get women to look at him. It's hard to say. And so anybody who goes and says this as a profiler is making up crap, because you just don't know. All I know is he didn't rape women. And he did seem to do overkill on them. Where the men, he just seemed to do as much as necessary and walk away. And it was never, in two of the cases, it wasn't as much as he should have done because he left two witnesses. So the first double homicide that is attributed, they both did die. The second, female was highly brutalized and the male survived. And the third, the same thing. And then we had the Paul Stein killing, which is so out of whack that suddenly he, instead of killing couples, he's suddenly in a taxi shooting someone in the back of the head, taking some part of his shirt, wiping down the thing and then sending it into the newspaper. Very different. No female involved at all. Only one shot. But was this because he was seeking fame? Now, that is the biggest thing in this whole case. Was he a true serial killer, or was he more like a mass murderer? Mass murderers commit their crimes because they want their moment in the sun. They want to be famous. They want to not be ignored by the world. They want some recognition. Like, hey, everybody thinks I'm a freaking loser. They all think I'm Clark Kent, but I'm really Superman. And they want to be recognized. That's why mass murderers do what they do. It doesn't matter who their victims are. It doesn't matter what they claim their motives were. That's all bull. They just want notoriety. Well, is that what he was really after? Was notoriety? Because he wasn't that involved with his victims, except for if you believe Sherry, the first one. The one from 4 years ago. Sherry Jo Bates. I just want to check on her name. Sherry Jo Bates. But even then, he didn't rape her. He sent a letter into the newspaper. So was his whole thing about notoriety? Even if that was him. And my belief is yes, he definitely wanted recognition. He was playing cat and mouse with the police, which is extremely unusual, because he thought he was smarter and he could get away with it. Can't say he didn't. He did. He won. I just want to point that out because everybody thinks, oh, they're just losers. No, that dude won. He may be a loser to you, the Clark Kent, but in reality, that dude was Superman. He won. And everybody else failed. He had superhuman qualities to beat out all the police in all these jurisdictions, beat out all the journalists, beat out every single person. He won. You got to give him credit. He accomplished what he set out to accomplish, to be the biggest and baddest serial killer of all time and never get caught. Yeah, he succeeded. So I don't believe he was a traditional serial killer who goes out to get the power and control in these separate incidents where he can then go back to his normal life and feel good about himself. He truly was a mass murderer, separating his crimes and ratcheting it up constantly just to make himself more and more and more important. He just wanted to be that infamous, and he accomplished it. I don't know if he accomplished it and then he said, I've done enough and I don't want to get caught, so I'm just going to cool it now, because my whole point was to become infamous, and I don't want to take a chance of getting nailed for this, or whether he went on the down low and just started killing privately just because he wanted to still have some fun, which I don't know that I believe that. Or he just died, or he ended up in some situation where he couldn't continue the killings. But for the time he was out there, that dude won. Understand that he won. Okay. And we all out here in the rest of the world, all the profilers, all the police, all the journalists, all the armchair profilers and book writers, we all lost. So there's that. So let's start with that. Let's see. Melissa, this is a good question, but he never got his name attached to take the credit for it. So did he win? He never got that moment in the sun. In his mind, he did. Okay, this is true. Sometimes mass murderers want their name in the paper. That's their moment in the sun. But I believe he got the thrill out of not being caught. He was out there, he committed all these crimes, he sent all this information in, and they never could figure it out. That was his moment in the sun. Now, I understand this. A psychopath, the only person that matters to a psychopath is himself. So whatever fantasy he has developed for what makes him feel good is this fantasy he's got. Now, it might be, I'm going to go and shoot up a whole school to get my name in the paper. And I don't even care if I'm dead at the end of the day. Because people ask that all the time. They're like, why would a guy, if he knows he's going to die, he's never even going to see the paper with his name in it, why would he do it? Because in his own head, he already sees the paper when he commits the crime. He may be dead, but he can see his name in it anyway. For this guy, I think for him to beat out the police was his moment in the sun. He didn't need his name to be out there. Now, had he gotten caught, mind you, if he screwed up enough to get caught, he would have played a new game, because psychopaths always do that. They're like, oh, you caught me. I planned that. Now I'm going to talk to every author, every FBI guy, and I'm gonna ratchet it up. But for this guy, at that point in time, I guess that he preferred the concept of getting away with it. And that's just say, we're not in his head for his little brains. So now, another interesting thing about him, which is there's two things that really stand out to me outside of the fact there was no sexual assaults, and it seemed to be purely for publicity purposes. If he committed the crimes that they say he committed, he used guns on some and knives on others. And let me go with the 5 that are supposedly attributed to him. So we've got the first crime, couple shot. Second crime, couple shot. Third crime, they were tied up and stabbed to death. Fourth crime, Stein, the taxi driver, shot once in the head. The standout odd one is the knifing of the couple at the lake that he had them. He actually, this is the one where he showed up in this weird costume. And then he told them he was escaped from a prison. He needed their money and their car so he could run off to Mexico. And he gave them rope, and he told the girl to tie up the boy. And then he finished tying them up. And then they thought they were going to survive because he would just take their stuff and run. But then he took out his knife and stabbed them to death, except for the guy lived. That is so different from the shooting crimes, because when he went and killed the others, especially the couples, the other 2 couples with a gun, he walked up to their cars. He never touched them. He shot into the cars. They tried to escape. He shot them as they were escaping. He just shot and shot and shot and shot and shot. He never had to touch them. No interaction at all with them. But in this case, the one by Lake Berry, I can't pronounce that, Berry. Let me do it again. Berryessa, Lake Berryessa. For some reason, he dresses in a complete weirdo costume and has a whole long conversation, ties them up and stabs them to death. It's so different from the other crimes. It's weird. Then you have the taxi driver who's just shot once in the head, almost like, I'm just going to do this just to prove I can do something different. And then if you go back to the Sherry crime, that was a ruse, by the way. That was a ruse. He took something off on her car, and then she couldn't start her car, and he offered her a ride. Now, there was another crime. It was the crime of Kathleen Johns. This is another woman who claimed that a guy waved her down at night and then came up to the car and said, look, your lug nuts are coming off. Do you want me to, I'm worried. I see your tire wobbling. If you have, I can tighten that for you. And she said, yes. And then supposedly untighten them. And then as she took off, the wheel falls off. And then he says, oh my God, it's really bad. Let me give you a ride to a gas station. So she gets in the car with her child, and then he drives away with her. And then he claims he's going to kill her and throw her child out the window. And at some point she jumps out with a child, and she claims he came back for her, but couldn't find her. And then he goes back and burns up her car. That's a ruse. And the same ruse was used on Sherry those many years ago. So we have 2 crimes which could be attributed to Zodiac, which are ruses. Then we have 2 crimes which are just shoot through windows and shoot if they try to run crime. And then we have the Paul Stein crime, which is really weird, just gets in the car and shoots him in the head. And then we have the one where it's sort of a ruse, where he comes and says, hey, I'm just here to rob you and here tie each other up. And I'm going to take your stuff. Also sort of a ruse. So usually people use ruses or they don't use ruses, but we have here a complete mixture of stuff, which is bizarre. And that's one of the reasons this case is so fascinating and why many people think there's more than one person involved. Could this be just one guy? Are we looking at 2 different killers? In other words, the woman who was, a ruse was used on the road. Was that not even connected with Zodiac, even though she thought it was Zodiac? Does that have nothing to do with it? Because you can have more than one serial killer in an area. That happens all the time. And was the Sherry crime way back, Sherry Bates, was that just something completely different and had nothing to do with Zodiac either? Are there more than one guy running around? Possible. Secondly, some people think that there's 2 or 3 people involved in all the crimes together, which is another theory. I tend to lean away from that one. I think that Mr. Zodiac would not particularly appreciate anybody having any knowledge of what he's doing specifically and getting involved in his stuff. I don't think so. I don't think it's a duo. So I think Zodiac is one guy, but I do think it's a possibility that the ruse crime, especially I don't necessarily believe that the one where the woman was abducted on the road was Zodiac. And Sherry Bates could be because of the letter writing thing, but again, a very different kind of crime. As far as Lake Berryessa, I can't pronounce that one, Berryessa, it was a knife instead of a gun, and it was sort of ruse-like, and he did this whole thing here. Was this a copycat crime? Except when he finished the crime, the guy at the lake also wrote on the guy's car the other 3 of the other crimes to say, hey, this is another one of my crimes. He did that. And supposedly he wouldn't have done that if it wasn't Zodiac. And he called right away and said, I killed 2 people. And he took, and Zodiac did take credit for it. So it's hard to say it wasn't Zodiac, but, he was covered up. So theoretically, it could be somebody else, a copycat, but unlikely. So did Zodiac go through different things to get more and more attention? In other words, let's take Sherry, what's her name again? Sherry Jo Bates. Let's take her out of it because she's early on. Let's say that was just coincidental. Or maybe he got the idea from Sherry Jo Bates, the letter writing thing. So he killed 2 people and nobody paid attention. So then 6 months later, he kills 2 more people and goes, I just killed 2. I did a double murder. And then he starts sending the letters. Now he's getting attention. Did he feel like after he had to ratchet it up and so he'd do this really unique thing at the lake? Maybe. And then that got attention. Did he think then I'm going to try something completely different. I'm going to get this cabbie and send in pieces of his shirt because that'll really get attention. And he did that. So he, as an attention seeker, I think he could change up his methodologies because his whole point wasn't the exact experience of killing more than it was more what it was going to be received as. So do I believe he could have committed? I don't personally believe he kidnapped a woman on the road with a ruse. I don't think that's Zodiac. But I think the 5 that they're claiming probably are. I think that those are the 5. Sherry Jo Bates. I'm not convinced of that one either. So let me check your comments before I go into the suspects. Did he differentiate on purpose so the police would think it was different people? No, because then they wrote them and said it was me. So no. Now, that would make sense if he never sent in 27 letters. What is it? 27 letters he sent. I mean, he was totally willing to claim things. Totally. Could he have read that in the newspaper? The Sherry Jo Bates, the early girl, the student that was the ruse was used. Yes, he could have read that. There was one paper that carried it. He claimed that one later, but I think he could have definitely got that out of the paper. And yes, most of the stuff that he knew was not made known to the public. So he really did know. So that's why there's kind of very little question that he committed certain murders. Yeah, I get why people have different theories. It's confusing. It's hugely confusing. And I say I'm not willing to spend 10,000 hours without a paycheck. So I can't get things into such a perfect, well, I don't even know if you could get into absolutes. And I think a lot of times because people can't, they're perfectly willing to throw everything out there just because it's exciting. And, you think, oh my God, who could have done it? And it doesn't really matter if we can never figure it out. You still got a book or a television show. Yes. Hi, Benny. You're finally here. Whew, I knew this was a show you wanted me to do. So, and I did read your stuff. The costume was maybe a superhero fantasy. Yes. I'm going to get to that. There is in the one of the things he talked about was uh, the the most dangerous game. It was alluded to in his writings. The most dangerous game also had a fellow in there who was committing. I think it's Count. Oh man, I forgot the guy's name. I did write it down because I haven't seen that. I haven't read that book or that story. It's a short story, and I haven't read it or watched the movie in years. But in the movie, let me find it. I did write it down here. Who was that guy in the movie? Dang. The movie was made, and basically, I think his name was Count somebody. In the movie, he was all dressed in black, and he had the knife at his side, and so it may well be that since he liked the dangerous game, which appears he did have a reference to that, that he was now acting out that part of the movie. That it's better to kill people than animals, and that was from the most dangerous game, written by Connell. I believe his name is Connell. Um, Dang, I wrote it someplace. Let me pull it out. And this is important for one of the suspects in the case. It's called. Hold on a second. Okay, the most dangerous game was written by Richard Connell, published in 1924, and he was a big game hunter that preferred people over animals. Now, what's interesting about this is why would he have an interest in this particular short story? And I'm going to say why, I believe. It's because every student ever went to high school in that age read that story. I did. I know it was part of my high school curriculum. It was very popular. So it's not that unique. And people think, oh my God, if the guy's interested in that thing, it must be because he's a Zodiac. No, it's because every kid read it. And I'll be curious how many of you actually read that story as well, who grew up in the U.S. I mean, I graduated from high school in 1972, and I remember reading it in high school. And I found it an interesting story. And it made it into a movie. So could he be dressing up like the guy in the most dangerous game? Yes, I believe. I believe he was. And why did he do that, though? Was it because he truly wanted to live out that fantasy, or was he creating a disguise because it wasn't quite dark yet? Because most of these people were killed after, when it was dark, so nobody would see him, and very isolated locations. Now, Lake Berryessa was also had its level of being kind of isolated, but there were people who there picnicking and stuff who gave descriptions of some creepy guy walking around. There were like different descriptions of a creepy dude without the mask part and the Zodiac thing sign on his chest. But did he walk around and then chuck that over his head and think it was cool? Because he wanted to disguise himself, or because he just wanted to see the people's fear in their faces, or he wanted to act out the most dangerous game. Who knows? But it was only once. It wasn't like every single crime he did that. And it's funny because when I look back at this, I remember thinking years back that he wore this at every crime. And it's Zodiac, and he just showed up at like 10 different crimes in this outfit. But it was one time. So I think he really was exploring, okay, I'm going to try this and see how much that gets him. And the change up of things truly was confusing to the police, even though he took credit for them. Still bloody confusing. I mean, it's like, what the heck? And it was, he'd also picked different jurisdictions, except for the first two of Vallejo, which is where I believe he probably originated from. But how confusing this whole thing was to the police. I say he did a great job of messing up their minds. Now, the other thing I want to point out, which he's famous for, is that he sent ciphers to the newspapers and letters, ciphers and letters. So he was trying to mess with them. And so he sent, let's see, for example, is this one of them? Okay, these are some of the letters he wrote. They were written by hand, and these have been, that's why every suspect gets their handwriting checked against this guy. And he writes very long letters as well. He's prolific. And I think this is important to point out that he's got some need to go on and on and on to mock, to explain, to prove. He sometimes puts down a list of what he's doing. This is the Zodiac speaking, and then is prolific. He's not just writing one paragraph, I did it. He was pretty short on the phone calls that he made to say I did it, but he's very prolific in his writings. And that was that, like he wanted to taunt them with everything he had to say. And then he sent the ciphers, and the ciphers were, that's not it. Where's my ciphers? Seriously, did I forget to put any of them up? Oh, did I do that again? Hold on a minute. Seriously? 1 second, folks. I'm looking for my ciphers now. Fascinating. Sorry. Help. Help. Oh my goodness. Okay. Hold on a second. Hold on. Just hold on 1 second. I'm messing around. That's where people start saying I'm befuddled. I thought I put the ciphers up. I wanted to show at least one cipher, and I guess I forgot to bring it over. And these were he sent these, and I have a ton of them, and for some reason I didn't get there. So annoying. I'm going to send this one over. Hopefully it'll get there. He did cryptograms. And that was what really made him unique, was the cryptograms. And he was like, if you can solve these, you can figure out who I am. And he sent a number of them. And I think 2 of them were solved, not by the CIA, interestingly enough. 2 of them were solved by some puzzle nuts. And then 1 was solved way, way later, but there's still unsolved parts of that going on. So let me see if I can find let's see if it comes over. At some point, it'll show up, hopefully, but I can't believe I forgot to send them over. So annoying. And now I've done it again. I can't. You have to understand, the camera is on top of the of where they send the information. Oh, I can do that. That's interesting. Never done that before. Anyway, so anyway, he sent over these cryptograms. I might get my picture up there eventually if it shows up. You have to send things from one place to another, and it's very difficult. But he sent cryptograms, and they were very unique cryptograms. And so some of them were solved, and basically they just said a whole bunch of nonsense. But they were difficult to solve. They were actually, let me see, how many, what did he use in these cryptograms? He used, five different types of signs. He used zodiac signs. He used scientific signs. He all kinds of different symbols, and made a very complicated cryptogram or cipher. You figure out this cipher, see if you can do it, and I'm going to try one more time to see if it's come over here. Something in this program, it's so annoying that when you send things over, they don't always show up. Just won't show up. That's one of the problems with StreamYard. I'll have to argue with them over that one. That if you send something over, it takes an hour for it to go. So anyway, he sent all these cryptograms, which he's famous for. And one of them, he even said, well, you can see one of them here. This is one of the cryptograms. And he said, I sent you this, and my name is, and if you could figure this name out, you would know who I am. I think he's just messing with them. I think the whole cryptogram thing was just messing with them. But what is interesting to me is 2 things. The cryptogram shows incredible amount of intelligence, and he very careful construction of the cryptograms, and not everybody can do that. So some people think he, had to be in like one of the military, somewhere in the military where he learned coding in the military. But the simple fact to me is that he had to have that level of focus to be able to do the cryptogram stuff. And then he writes this crap that he goes on and on and on about, nonsense stuff like, he can't wait here. He says, I shall torture all 13 of my slaves that I'm waiting for in paradise. They're waiting for me in paradise. So he's saying that when he goes to paradise, all the people he killed will be his slaves. And then he does cryptograms. One is brilliance, genius IQ, and the other is, what the heck is wrong with you, dude? And why are you going on with all this nonsense? And he also does a thing that's interesting. He misspells a tremendous amount of words. Are you telling me a guy who can do cryptograms to that level can't spell? I'm sorry, I don't believe it. I don't believe he can't spell. So why does he have so many misspellings in his writings? For example, he writes Christmas as Chris, M-A-S-S, a double S. Everybody, almost anybody in the world knows how to spell Christmas. Even if they're half illiterate, they can still spell Christmas because they see that over and over again. It's not a tricky word. So tricky words, I understand. I've misspelled things, and thank God for, a spell check that goes, you didn't do that right. They catch me. So I've misspelled and I've mistyped. But the level of weird spellings like paradise, P-A-R-D-I-C-E. Who spells paradise that way? And he does that over and over. He says, there was another one, trying to see if it's in that one here. Let me see if there's anything over here. He does, but there's a lot of them. I mean, a lot of misspellings that make no sense. So is he putting the misspellings in there to pretend he's not smart? Why would he do this? Is he trying to disguise something about himself? Or can he really not spell? And if that's true, how can he do cryptograms, ciphers, brilliant ones that some can't even figure out? And then he writes garble? That is part of what's so strange about this guy. Then when he commits the crimes, he's very cautious about not leaving a ton of evidence, not being seen, generally speaking, except for, well, then again, he leaves people alive. So he's got this, what do you want to say, split personality kind of thing. Is he schizophrenic in some way that he goes from here to there? Does he have some kind of something wrong in the brain, which allows him to flip from one side to the other? I haven't seen that in successful serial killers. I've seen people who have schizophrenia commit crazy crimes. I see serial killers just be nasty psychopaths and commit vicious crimes. But to see both of them together, it's weird. It's absolutely very, very strange. And that's why some people think it's two different people that working together, like one's a crazy guy and one's a solid guy. I don't think so. I think it is one guy. But why is he like this? And how does he survive in life? I would say if I'm going to pick somebody he's similar to, it would be the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. Ted Kaczynski was brilliant, but he was also off. And he liked to set bombs. People who make bombs are usually very brilliant and very meticulous on one hand. On the other hand, I got Ted Kaczynski living in a cabin and being a fruitcake. So those two things are very opposing, shall we say. And so I would think that, to me, Zodiac is similar to Ted Kaczynski in that. He also did threaten he was going to bomb school children. I'm sorry. He had a couple of different things. He was going to put bombs out there, and he was also going to shoot children as they came off a bus. But he did talk about making bombs, and he gave specific information. I do have that here, about the bombs he was going to make, which again is very different from a normal serial killer. Serial killers don't usually make bombs. So that is super, super weird, right? Where's my bomb making stuff? That better not go missing on me. Okay, where are we? Oh, for God's sakes. Where did it go? I just saw it. 1 minute. I tell you, I'm having problems today. For God's sakes. Sorry about this, guys. It's a live show, and things go wrong on live shows, especially with me. What the heck? It's one of those days. I just saw the stupid thing, and now I can't find it. I do not know what's happening. No, it's not that. This is another version of something he did, though. Now, see how weird this is? So he does cryptograms, but then he does stupid cards and says, here, see how paradise is written wrong, and crazy stuff like that. He's all over the place as far as what he wants to show people. It's just it's incredibly peculiar, which is why it's hard to pin down exactly who he is. I'm still looking for the bomb thing, which I definitely had here, but now it's missing. Sorry. It's not my day here. You burn your lip in the morning, you can't function. But he wrote about bombs. He actually showed a diagram of how the bomb would look and all of this type of stuff. So he's got cryptograms, which are brilliant. Then he's got descriptions of bombs, which is scientific and brilliant. And then he's got this nonsense. Who is this guy? Who is he? So let's get into that's where I saw my picture. it's on my iPad and didn't get over for some reason. I'm going to see if I can send it. I'm going to try again to send things over, but you would think things come over instantly, but for some reason they do not do so on StreamYard. So I will get back to that. Let me check some of your comments. I'm going to go to the suspects. Yeah, that's a good point, Lila. Weird, just plain weird. It sounds like tremendous mental imbalance. It does, but in such a strange fashion. With the cryptograms, solvable or just garbled? Good question, Aisha. They solved 3 of them. 3 out of 5 were solved. And so they weren't just garbled. They were difficult, though. And that's why I wanted to show you one of them. One of the things he did was they were in lines without spaces. So in other words, if you've ever done cryptograms on one of these puzzle books, they break up the words. So let's say the first word is 3 letters, and you think that could be the, and then so you can sort of guess what these words could be based on one letter is going to be A or I, right? It has to be I this or A that. If it's 2, it's an or N. You have some ideas. But what he did was he put all of them in a row together without any breaks. Therefore, you could not tell how long the word was. That's a brilliant thing. As a matter of fact, just to point this out, Edgar Allan Poe wrote a short story called The Gold Bug. And in that gold bug, the same thing happened. The guy just wrote in lines without breaks to make it more difficult. Then he also used multiple symbols for letters. So in other words, let's say a circle was not just, T was not a circle, and every T was not a circle. He might have a circle for one T and an X for another T and something else for another T. So he was really making it very, very difficult. But they were solved. There were those that were solved. So they weren't just total garble. The information included was pointless. It didn't serve any purpose. It wasted a whole lot of time, and he was playing his game and laughing at them, and they finally solved it. He's like, okay, you got one. But he put these symbols in there, and they were all kinds of weird symbols, but they were not total garble. I thought that myself. I thought, could he just be I could make a cryptogram and nobody will be able to solve it because it's not solvable because it means nothing. I could just be putting a whole bunch of phony symbols in. But no, his symbols actually, it was a true cryptogram, a true cipher. He was doing that. Now, this part where he says this is his name, that could be a joke because nobody's ever figured that out. So he could have done all true ciphers and then messed with them on that one and just made up crap. And so they think he could figure out his name, but it's not going to. They're not going to be able to. This is never solved. So yeah, he's very clever about that. Oh, this is interesting. Spelling paradise like that almost seems like it's a dumb joke, like a pair of dice. Oh, I like that, Melissa. A pair of dice. Cool. I never thought of that one. That one's good. I want to point out again why it's always nice sometimes when detectives work, it's always nice to have a team. Profilers, it would be nice to be on a team, because I never even crossed my mind. But he could be joking. It's very hard to tell if he's joking about that or he's just putting in a C. I thought maybe he was trying to, some people think he has some British spellings in there, and they think he's British. I don't find that to be true, but I do see a couple of spellings that do look more like they're British spellings. So it's, let's see. Oh, perhaps the Zodiac was on an autism spectrum. Savant even. Cryptography was his brilliance, but spelling wasn't. I could think that's possible, but I think the spelling is so, I'm going to talk about one person I think why he might choose to spell constantly incorrectly. But yeah, I think that's possible, that he just, for whatever reason, his brain did not work in that area. He could work in maybe more of symbolic stuff, but he couldn't work in writing stuff. I think that's perfectly reasonable. Let's see. VLW says, I must be smarter than I thought. I did line cryptograms with fake letters in it to send notes to my best friend in high school. If a teacher confiscated it, they wouldn't make any sense of it. So you just made bad cryptograms and mess with people. I have to watch out for you, VLW. That's unique. Okay, I'm going to see if any of my stuff came in, just because it's driving me crazy now. Okay, anything come in here? Or are we just still being stubborn? No, for God's sakes. I think aha, finally, stupid thing showed up. Okay, here's one. There it is. There's one of his cryptograms. Okay, sorry it took me so long to get there. But that's one of his right there. And you can see that they have figured it out. I like killing people because, can't quite read the writing here, but something that's, but you see it definitely, all of it, it's a real cryptogram. So somebody figured it out. It's a real cryptogram, but a difficult one, mind you, a very difficult one. The bomb thing also showed up finally. And this is the bomb thing. So he wrote this one. A and B are photoelectric switches. See switches? Switches is incorrectly written, spelled. A and B are photoelectric switches without the T in it. When sunbeam is broken, A closes circuit. But see, circuit doesn't seem to be spelled right either, which makes B the cloudy day. So the bomb won't go off by, I think it was accident. P.S. I hope you have fun trying to figure. See, figure has two G's in it. Who I killed. See, that's they're weird spellings. They're not the normal spelling mistakes people make, because we all make spelling mistakes, but those are abnormal spelling mistakes, which is why I wonder about it. They're just stuff that nobody writes, except children. Sometimes you see children write things like that because they have no clue how the language works and they haven't seen much of the language. It's not like older people who have familiarity of the language. I don't believe he doesn't have familiarity of the language. So why does he write in such a strange way? Why does he write like making children mistakes? And so the question is it a brain issue, or is he doing it on purpose just to mess with people, to make them think he can't spell? And there's never been an answer to that because we never met the guy. And pretty much outside of, let me go back to that letter here, the one from the girl from the college, which I think may not be one of his, but you see the word twitched is written, is highlighted, TWICHED. Zodiac also wrote it without the X, without the T as well. So that's interesting. So he also had a spelling mistake in there. So is it a typo because he's typing? Is it coincidental? Or is it the same guy? Or does nobody can spell? Who can spell? Don't know. All right. So now you've seen some. Now let's get to the one other thing that's very important with this case, and that is his name. Okay. So Zodiac, he's given himself a name. And that symbol's in a weird spot. He calls himself Zodiac. And interesting enough, when he writes the letters, he says the Zodiac. He doesn't just call himself Zodiac, which I find odd right away, because I would say I am Zodiac. Why does he say I am the Zodiac? Was there other Zodiacs running around? No. So I thought if you have any ideas of why he put the before it, I find that fascinating. Because I am Zorro. Would you say I am the Zorro? I am Superman. Would you say I am the Superman? I find that very strange. Why is it putting the before Zodiac? And then he uses a symbol here. That is his symbol. Now, if we look at what does that symbol come from is the question. There are a variety of ideas. This one, for example, this is a Celtic symbol. Could be that, maybe. Some think it's just a target. Some people, I think Graysmith tried to say it was like when you do when you're doing somebody's chart, you have all the different zodiac. It's in a circle. So you have, like Leo, Gemini, it goes around the circle. And it's like this, and you've got these different houses. And so you have a circle with lines through it. And since he's talking about Zodiac, is he obsessed with Zodiac horoscopes and that kind of thing? Is he into that? Is that where it comes from? He never explained why he was the Zodiac or even picked the term Zodiac at all. Now, the other one, which is possible, is one of the suspects, I'm going to get to the suspects in a second, had a watch, which is a Zodiac watch, which had the symbol on it. This watch is made by a Swiss company. By the way, it's quite expensive. I looked them up. It's like $1,000 for one of their watches. They come in all kinds of different kinds, and they're just very fancy watches. I looked for the explanation about why they called it Zodiac and why they had that symbol, but I could come up with no information as to why all this was that way. Could not come up with it at all. So don't know. Here's a picture from the company. I think this is it. The most popular watch in 3/4 of the world. Really? Okay. This particular watch was called the Sea Wolf. And I'm going to say why I think that's kind of interesting in a minute. And there they have the symbol, and then it's called Zodiac, and it's called also Sea Wolf. Supposedly one of the suspects had that exact watch, the Sea Wolf watch. So an adventurer's watch, in and out of the water. Now, you could go in the water with it, and one of the suspects also was a scuba diver. And so that's also interesting. So is the symbol a Zodiac symbol? Is it a symbol from the watch or some kind of mystical thing? Where did he come up with it? Because he had to create this as his name. He could have come up with anything like Super Killer, or the Demon, anything. But he came up with Zodiac and the Zodiac, and he came up with the Zodiac symbol as well. Why? What was the purpose for this? Obviously, he wanted to, when he wrote the letters, originally when he wrote some of the first letters, he did not call himself Zodiac. Then he added that as time went on. Why did he add that? Because he wanted to name himself. Clearly, he wanted to give himself a name, so he'd be famous for that name, and it worked beautifully. It wasn't in the first letter at all. It was that he just called himself. He just said hello, basically. I think I have it. I think I have one of them here that if I haven't lost that one too. because it's not my day for this. Let's see. Look at this. This one he said Zodiac. You just say Zodiac over here too, but some of them actually do not have the term Zodiac in them. So the first one definitely didn't. So he got there. But why did he call himself Zodiac? What do you think? And then I'm going to go to the suspects, and we'll see whether any of this stuff matches any of the suspects. But I'll get your thoughts on that first. I'm still getting a feeling you're getting at him being a foreigner. Not at all. I don't think so. I think he's a total Californian. Not at all. If he was somehow bad at spelling, that explains why the ciphers were so hard to decide. Oh, no, the ciphers were brilliant. He used a conglomeration of symbols from different fields to make this incredibly difficult cipher. No, that's why they had such a hard time figuring it out. It was brilliant. His spelling is not brilliant, not at all the same. The diver's mask is similar to the mask Zodiac wore. I thought he just kind of put something over his head and stuck some glasses up there, Benny. Was it really a diver's mask? I thought it was just glasses over the eye holes. Am I wrong about that? So much information, you can sometimes get lost. Come back and tell me what. I don't know that he. I don't know. I don't think that's really a diver's mask. I think it's just something to cover his head up. Personally, I don't see it. Melissa says, I think the is just the way people talk when they refer to the Zodiac anyway. They do now, but he was the one that started that. He said in his letters, he specifically said, look at the letter here. This is the Zodiac speaking, not this is Zodiac. Why didn't you just say this is Zodiac? This is the Zodiac speaking. I find that interesting. I haven't come up with a conclusion on that, but I find it very interesting because I would write a letter. I'd say, this is Zodiac. This is Pat Brown. This is Profiler Pat. This is Crazy Woman. This is Cat Lady, whatever you want to put in there. But this is the Zodiac. And then saying speaking. He always, and as the letters went on, he'd say, this is a Zodiac speaking. He didn't start that way, but he ended up that way. And that became a thing for him. No, not a mind reader. I don't think he was foreign. Wait. Okay. On the Zodiac watch, add what? Add what? Okay, wait a minute. Okay, I'm confused what that even means. Lila, I like the watch theory better than giving him credit for astrology occult leanings. Maybe even thought they'll never figure this one out. Chuckle, chuckle. I'm going to lean with you on that, Lila, about the watch thing. And I'm going to show you why in a minute. All right. Let me go to some of the suspects. But Benny, if you come back with that, whatever you're trying to say, let me know. Kelly. Did he kill people when a certain part of the Zodiac was in the sky? I think that Gray Smith, when he was going down the rabbit hole at some point, started coming up with those connections. You know, they were killed near water. They were killed on a certain time of the year, near holidays. They were killed on, a lot of people have gone there. I personally think that's too much work. I don't even think he would have done that much work. I don't see great astrology crap anywhere in here. The only thing that's weird is that about the slave thing in paradise. I can't figure out where that even comes from because I've looked at all kinds of religious stuff and just wherever you get it from. And I'm not coming up with that. I know in Islam, there's that thing about you get 72 virgins in paradise, but that's not what he's talking about. So what is this slaves in paradise? I don't even find a very good reference for it. So I don't know if he's just making up crap. Benny says the watch ad you showed for the brand Zodiac, there was a picture of a diver with a mask. With a similar to the mask Zodiac wore at the Berryessa. Okay, I'm going to go back and look at that, Benny. Let's see. In this ad. Oh, I see what you're showing. I'm not convinced. I mean, he looks like a scuba diver, but the mask, I don't think the mask that Zodiac wore, just the black thing over his head with some glasses, really represents that. Could it? Could it represent he's a diver? Okay, let me think about it. Maybe Benny. Let me rethink this one. Okay, hold on. Let me go back here to a picture of the. Okay, does he look like a diver? Well, I would say this: if the guy was a scuba diver, maybe the concept of something like that over his head may have meaning to him. This is one of these tricky things where it's hard to know whether we're just making up stuff because we know something else, or whether it's just he needed a hood over his head because he didn't want to be seen, because he was trying to be scary and it was still daylight. I mean, the whole little outfit is bizarre, but he only did it once, so I think it just sometimes people with their imaginations just come up with weird crap. And I think Zodiac was one of them that came up with weird crap. He liked to play games. He'd like to do weird stuff. He's a weirdo. So it's really hard to say. Now let's go to the suspects. All right. So the suspects, there are some which are just hilarious, mind you. All right. So, but who are the suspects? They're the number one suspect. I'm going to get back to him in a minute because I want to start with the lesser known suspects. All right. Because they make me laugh. Hold on. All right. The other suspects. My favorite one is Steve Hodel. Remember Steve Hodel? I did a whole thing on Black Dahlia, and Steve Hodel wrote that his dad was a murderer of Black Dahlia. And of course, he claims pretty much his dad murdered everybody else as well. So now he claims that his dad also was Zodiac. Well, of course, he's been everything else. So that's one of those amusing ones that just makes me laugh. There was another claim that, let's see, I think someone tried to say that Ted Kaczynski could be Zodiac, and that was kind of stupid too. Yeah, there's a bunch of silly ones, and there's the newest one out, which is, his name is Gary Francis Post, or Poste. It's a French sounding name. So I'm going to give you there's five of them. There's five main ones. Arthur Lee Allen was the biggest one. Lawrence Kane, Ross Sullivan, and Gary Post, and Richard Gaikowski. Okay, those are kind of the five I'm going to look at. And there's different reasons for why these were picked. All right. Now, let's see. I'm trying to present this in a way so you can see how crazy all this stuff is and why it's so confusing. One of the issues has been over that there was after Stein, Paul Stein, the taxi driver, was killed. Supposedly, 3 teenagers looking down from a building, it was dark out, so that his face would be in and out of shadow, saw this guy getting out of the cab and wiping it down, and they caught this glimpse of him, so they gave a description of him. Then, supposedly, this information went to the police, and they put a bolo out, be on the lookout for, and they put out a bolo that was NMA, which is Negro Male Adult, but it was supposed to be WMA. Some people said this was a racist thing. They called the guy black when he wasn't. I don't think that was. I think somebody typed it wrong. So originally they were right away they were looking for a black guy, but it turned out it was just a mistype. It was supposed to be WMA, white male adult. And there was one police officer who saw a guy walking by, and he thought that was the guy that they were looking for. And so he gave a description. His description didn't match the 3 teenagers. But in the long run, this is the picture of, we got this one, which was described by one of the surviving males at the one at the lake. He's described this guy in this freaky outfit, and he said he thought he was maybe everybody gets different heights, and depending on whether you're lying down, you're sitting in a car, whether your brains are being blown out. I've seen heights from 5'8" up to 6'4". I mean, I've seen all kinds of heights. Most everybody says the guy is sturdy. Okay, that description is almost all the places except for where the woman was kidnapped in the car, and she said he was like 160 pounds, and that's not a big dude. But most said he was sturdy, hefty, lumbering, so a big guy. And the weight seems to go between 180 and 220. Ages seem to go from 25, 30 up to 50. So very confusing. But at the Stein crime, where the taxi driver was stabbed, 3 teenagers looking down said they thought he was youngish. Well, actually, it turns out they didn't actually say that. That was later added into the description. And they said he had glasses on. He had this short haircut. He's a white guy. And there were other places where somebody said the guy's face was round, but this guy's face wasn't round. They claimed at some point they said it was 5'8". The police officer who saw the guy going by, who could have been Zodiac, gave a different description. So this is, I don't even have a clue if this is even anywhere near accurate to what the guy looked like. I don't know whether I have no idea. And this is one of the problems. We have different witnesses who give different descriptions, and they're kind of like, some are ignored, some are accepted, and some are created. This was the creation eventually this was Zodiac. Okay. Now, I want to show you some pictures of some of these suspects. Okay. Show you how difficult this is. So this is Zodiac, supposedly this guy here, right? Now, check this out. Which one of these 3 guys do you think is Zodiac? Look at them. See the glasses they're all wearing? Yeah, that's interesting. Well, 2 of these guys are suspects. This is actually the cab driver that was murdered. So he's not a suspect. But they said Zodiac had a widow's peak. He had black glasses. His face kind of went like that. Doesn't that dude look just like this dude? And do the other 2 guys, isn't that a toss-up? Could one of those guys be it? Sure. That's the problem. That is the problem. Everybody can look like this guy. And we don't even know if the glasses he put on his face were his real glasses, or he's just putting on his face to disguise himself. As a matter of fact, this is concerning. I think I am Zodiac. Look at me. Just think about that. I'm Zodiac too. There is the problem. Now, this is Arthur Leigh Allen. Arthur Lee Allen. Sorry, I said it wrong. Arthur Lee Allen. He's the biggest suspect. Now, look at these 2 pictures. Now, he could definitely be the guy dressed like this. And he, by the way, the first guy who was shot and survived, identified him in a lineup. If you put glasses on this guy at a distance, could he look like this guy? Sure. Could somebody think his face was thinner and his face was rounder? Maybe. I don't know exactly what it looked like at that time. Did he gain 20 pounds before this picture? He is a big guy. He's lumbering. He's taller than 5'8", like some described. So this gets really confusing. Which one of these suspects could be this guy or this guy? I don't know. Because all the witnesses seem to have slightly different variations, and I haven't got a clue. So I'm going to say most of the witness descriptions I can throw right out the window right now. They're not going to serve any purpose in proving who Zodiac is. They might prove he's not a female. They might prove he's not black. But other than that, quite frankly, pretty useless. Absolutely pretty useless. Yeah. And say the ages, the height, the weight, everything differs enough that it's hard to say. And again, like even when we look at the Stein case, the teenagers were looking from a distance. I don't know how much they actually saw and whether one teen influenced the other ones when they were giving statements. The police officer that saw him, we don't even know if he actually saw Zodiac. Maybe it was a different guy walking by and he thought it was him. How do we even know it's the right guy? We don't. So witness description, we can just, I'd say, chuck it out the window. It's pretty useless. So, but if we go back here and we take the guy. This is the suspect, Ross Sullivan. He's a suspect in the first very, very early crime before the Zodiac stuff started. The Sherry Joe Bates crime. The girl that comes out and her car isn't functioning. The guy gives her a ride. He worked in the library, and he became a suspect in her crime. And could he be Zodiac? Well, could be. But apparently, according to the police back then, he couldn't have done. He was not Zodiac. And some even say he had an alibi for when Sherry Joe Bates was killed. So I don't know anything about Ross Sullivan that convinces me he's anything. And one of the problems is I'm not able to go through every single police report, and I'm not able to talk to this guy. I'm not able to verify alibis. I'm not able to verify anything about him, to get my own feeling about him, to ask him the questions I want to ask him. So I don't have any clue. All I know is, as far as I know, not a great deal of evidence on this guy. Over here we have, Lawrence Kane. Now, the girl that was killed at the lake, her family, a sister, somebody started claiming that there was some guy like that. They thought it was him that was stalking her. And there was no proof of that. And apparently she had a whole bunch of guys stalking her. So it was really questionable who was actually stalking her, or whether she was just making claims. But this guy, that's what they say he was. He had a psychological problems. He was a con man. And his voice was, now people have heard his voice. And his voice is like he's from New York, so he talks more like from Brooklyn or something. And nobody seemed to describe at the lake, for example, that the guy spoke with anything of that sort of accent. Nothing really connecting him. His handwriting didn't match. So that's a whole nother issue. We're going to talk about handwriting samples, but no. So he's, I think, kind of a wishy-washy possibility. So now let's look at who's left here. Let's look at the newest one first. I'm going to go back to Alan at the end because he is the most likely suspect. There's another guy called Richard Gawowski, Tom Voigt, who wrote a book called Zodiac Killer, Just the Facts. Believes he's the best choice. He was like a journalist and some other issues. I just don't find anything convincing on him at all. Alan was that John Voight. I'm sorry, not John Voight. Tom Voight. It's not John Voight, the actor. Tom Voight. Alan was his second in line suspect. So now we've got, Kane, I'm not sold on. This guy from way back in the first, the one that is not necessarily a Zodiac crime. Ross Sullivan, not so convinced about. Gawowski, again, don't have much information on him that really sends me over the moon. And then we've got the newest one, which is, his name is Post. Okay. And he's quite amusing because there's a group called Case Breakers, and all this it came out in 2018, but it just showed up a few days ago, where they're claiming the FBI hasn't investigated this guy properly, and we believe he's the guy who did it. Let me find a picture of this fellow. Don't tell me that one missing too. I'm having trouble today. It's been a long week, I have to admit. Seriously? I really apologize, guys. I'm out to lunch today. I really am. And for some reason, some of the photos just never made it over. But I want to show you this photo. So let me go look for it and send it over. Where is it? Oh, here we are. This to me is just so funny. If it doesn't come over, I'm just going to have to hold up my computer and send it over that to you. show it to you instead of send it. Let's see if it'll show up for me. Okay, that's been sent over. I'm going to double check to make sure I'm just not missing it. The picture. Somebody told me I need a really big screen, and I believe they're right, but I don't know that that would be functionable or not. So, yeah, where did he go? All right, let me see if I can get him over here. Their claim is that Post. They said they looked at the anagrams and they found that Post. His name was somewhere in an anagram. Of course, it's very vague and they're not proving anything. But the funniest thing is the reason they're saying it's him is because of, let me show, here we go. All right. And I found him. All right. This is their big thing. This is it. This, by the way, this case breakers thing is supposed to be like 50 brilliant retired detectives and journalists and all that stuff. And there's a whole list of names, but I've never even heard of these people. And the head guy is this journalist dude. But anyway, look at this picture. So you see this the sketch on the left shows that he has some kind of wrinkles in his forehead, or maybe scars. And you see on the right, this on the right is Gary Francis Post. So he's got some wrinkles or some scars in his head. Mostly to me, it just sounds like a guy who's been out in the sun a bit. Now, seriously? Oh no, there they are again. I think I'm a better fit. This is getting scary. Wait a minute. I gotta look at that picture again. Oh my God. Yes, I've got the same things. There they are. God, the stupidity. This has gotten in all the papers, all over the media, that they've now found the real Zodiac based on his name, which is not actually in the cryptograms, and that he's got wrinkles on his forehead and or scars, and nobody actually saw scars on this guy's head. So I don't even know why they're on that sketch thing there. It's just all stupid. This is so stupid. And this is what happens when people they go down a rabbit hole and they come up with literally any weird thing to say this guy's connected. So that one is like literally the worst dumb stuff I've ever heard about. Oh my God. Wait, but this is a good point. So the suspect is anyone wearing black glasses. Yes. And again, if you are out there and you want to disguise yourself in some way, you can put on a cheap pair of drugstore glasses just like that as a way to make people, not see who you really are. Sure. That's why people wear sunglasses, the same thing. Yeah. You could wear a wig. You could do anything. You could put lines on your head. But this is why I say all these descriptions are pretty pointless. Oh, okay. Yeah, they're making some sort of claim. That's a good word, Florence, claim. There's no proof there's any DNA match. That's garbage. Let me get to the DNA and the fingerprints in a minute here. Well, there you go. It's a real puzzler. Wasn't that what he wanted all along? And he won. He did win. Absolutely. Now, there are three things that they hope to connect people to: the handwriting, DNA. The claim is that there was DNA on a postage stamp. They sent all these letters, and supposedly there's some DNA on a postage stamp that made somebody licked or whatever. And it wasn't a full DNA thing. It's just a partial DNA, which could rule people out but not rule people in. Now, mind you, this is assuming that the DNA on the stamp is actually from Zodiac. Now, the suspect I'm going to bring up next, Alan, some people claim that he had other people lick the stamps for him, which I think is kind of ludicrous. But not entirely impossible. You could have a kid around you and you could say, hey, put these stamps on my letter for me. But here's the point about that, which is why I don't think it would have been a planned thing. Sorry. I'm trying to find it. Okay, the only possible DNA sample comes from beneath a stamp. Oh, and okay, here we go. I didn't even read this properly. Beneath a stamp. That doesn't mean it was on the stamp. It was beneath the stamp. That can be anybody who handled the envelope. Their DNA could be touch DNA on there, and then you put the stamp on top of it. It doesn't even mean that it's from that. So there you go. Again, we don't even know if the DNA has anything to do with the Zodiac. So I would say, to me, the DNA is garbage. That it could exclude people. How can you exclude it when you don't know that it's actually his DNA? We don't. We have absolutely no clue. So I'm going to say the DNA is nonsense. But there was also the truth that 1986 was the DNA fingerprinting was first used in forensic science. So back then, in the 60s, he wasn't worried about DNA because he didn't know it existed. So I'm sure he wasn't going to say, I don't want my DNA on the stamp, so let somebody else lick it. That's just stupid. That would make no sense at all. So I don't buy that one. Now, some people, by the way, put stamps on, but they just take a sponge. And if you're doing a lot of stamps, you just use a sponge. So it's just water. Now, he could have done that anyway. And that could be why his DNA wasn't anywhere on the stamp, but somebody's DNA under it could have been on an envelope that he had purchased from the post office or wherever he got it from. Who knows? It could have gotten from work. Somebody could have just left it. I think the DNA is very questionable. Handwriting is interesting. DNA, I think, is questionable. And then there's some fingerprints from the Stein crime, which, again, is not necessarily proven to be that of a Zodiac, the Zodiac, and some partial palm print, again, which hasn't really been proven. So I would say all the physical evidence sucks. And I don't think anybody's going to be proven to be or disproven to be based on that. So, and the handwriting, that to me is a little bit more interesting because he wrote a heck of a lot of letters. And I have looked at them and I see certain consistent things within that. And so either the guy's handwriting is going to be consistent with that or it's not. And if it's not, the only other possibility is that he used some methodology to not have his own handwriting there, which could be he writes with the other hand. Could be that I think it was Graysmith who thought maybe he used a projector and used some other thing to project on there, and then he copied that. But it's very consistent, so it had to be copying some particular person's writing. But so far, I will say this: nobody's handwriting has matched. None of the suspects. So either one of the suspects was clever about how the writing came out, or they have no idea who the Zodiac is at all. They simply never, ever figured it out. So the guy who is the Zodiac never had his handwriting analyzed. That's a possibility. Now let's go to the number one suspect. And do I think it is this guy? Okay. So number one suspect is, all right, it is Arthur Lee Allen. All right. Now let me give you just a little bit on Arthur Lee Allen. Let me pull it up here, and why he was the number one suspect. Now Graysmith thought it was Allen. Allen died in 1992. He had a heart attack. He was a potential suspect based on circumstantial evidence. He had been interviewed by police in the early days of the investigations and was subject of several search warrants over a 20-year period. He's the number one suspect for police detectives. Now, the DNA, which I say is crap, it did not match him. The fingerprints, which I question, don't match him. The handwriting does not actually match his handwriting. I have looked at that. I've checked out his handwriting, and I'm not finding it particularly matching the handwriting of Zodiac. That, to me, is the one thing that really makes me say, was he Zodiac? Because of that. Unless he was ambidextrous, and they tried to get him, he's actually left-handed. They tried to get him right with his right hand. And he sort of scribbled it, like, I can't do it. But could he? And could he change up on the right hand? Or was he using a technique? Because this guy was brilliant, in my opinion. He could have used a technique to disguise handwriting. I wouldn't be surprised. But his handwriting, his natural handwriting, does not match. I will say that. There's another interesting thing about him, because he's supposedly left-handed. When the guy was in the cab, he supposedly was, that one print, they got this partial print supposedly on, like the guy was leaning on this, And let's see, he was leaning on this, and oh no, wait a minute. Oh, now I forgot. Sorry. Dang it. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was his right hand was the print, and he was wiping with his left hand, which made me wonder whether it was Alan, because he would be left-handed if he's doing that. Because I would use, I'm right-handed, so I would lean on my left and do that with my right. If I were left-handed, I'd do that, like that. So again, it's real questionable, but there's no fingerprints or palm prints matching Alan either. So the physical evidence doesn't match, which I say is maybe crap. And handwriting doesn't match, but he may have disguised it, but it doesn't match in my opinion. So why is he a suspect though? And why is he the top suspect? Or are we just imagining stuff? All right. First, he was interviewed. He was interviewed by Detective John Lynch of the Vallejo Police Department. He was reported to be in the vicinity of Lake Berryessa attack. He described himself scuba diving at Salt Point on the day of the attacks. And then he came to his attention again in 1971 when his friend Donald Cheney reported to police that Alan had spoken of his desire to kill people, used the name Zodiac, and secured a flashlight to a firearm for visibility at night, like the second double homicide. And then they found out he had a dishonorable discharge from the U.S. Navy. They thought this was a guy in the military because of the boots that he wore, and possibly the coding thing too, coming from the military. He had a dishonorable discharge, which means that probably a psychopath. And psychopaths, I mean, they want to get him the hell out of there. I don't know what he did in the Navy, but he got chucked out. He had also been fired from his job as an elementary school teacher in March of 1968 after allegations of sexual misconduct with students. He also supposedly a 12-year-old boy he touched inappropriately, and there's also a story about him touching a girl inappropriately on a trampoline. He was generally well regarded by those who knew him, so he did have a side of his personality which people enjoyed, but he was also described as fixated on young children and angry at women, which I think fits very well with what we got here. They obtained a search warrant for his residence. And then when he got arrested for sexually assaulting a 12-year-old boy, he pleaded guilty and served 2 years imprisonment. And I think nothing happened during those years. They served another warrant when he got out, way out in 1991. And then after he died, they did another warrant. So they had a bunch of different places they looked. He had a trailer one place. He lived in his mother's house. His mother's house, it was quite a fancy house he lived in, actually. His mother had money. Let's put it that way. So it was quite fancy. And his mother used to travel a lot and not be around. Now, serial killers love a home where they can get a place to stay for free, but the person who's there, the female person, is gone a lot. There was a basement in his mother's home. And one of the things the Zodiac did was talk about having a basement, which is unusual in California because of the landscape. But there was a basement in that house. And so they looked in that basement. And one of the things, some of the other things he had said was, he was building bombs, right? Remember the thing about building bombs? Well, they did investigate his basement. I mean, they did the search warrants, and they came up with, look at what they came up with at the house, Mommy's house. This is Mommy's house. This was one of the drawers. See all the guns he's got? And over here, this is bomb making material. And he had all the kind of bomb making stuff that the Zodiac said he had. So, interesting. So he wasn't just a guy who was creepy. He was a guy that he was known to carry knives. He did kill animals. He was known to kill animals when he was young. And he'd said all kinds of really creepy things about killing people too. And then he had the bomb thing going, which matched as well. So there was a good reason they were looking at him. And one of the reasons I find it interesting is that as far as his school teaching goes, he was a school teacher, and elementary school kids. And one time he taught in a junior high. And his writings, by the way, his regular writing is spelled perfectly. He's a teacher. He should be able to spell, right? But he also knows how children misspell. He knows all the methods of children misspelling. He's read lots of their papers, and he sees all their misspellings. I'm curious whether, if he was Zodiac, whether he used what he learned from the school children to be able to just write these things and put these misspellings in as the school children would do. I wonder about that. He also talked about shooting children coming off of a bus. And again, that's related to school. So I just wonder whether the Zodiac was a school teacher. Something else I kind of find interesting about is that the Dangerous Game thing, which was a very popular short story that's taught in schools. And there's some other couple things which I think are interesting. When we go back to this watch, it's called the Sea Wolf. Now, there were a number of different watches, but the Sea Wolf, of course, you could wear it underwater, but the Sea Wolf is also, a famous book by Jack London wrote a book called Sea Wolf, and that was all about going to sea and all about this captain who was psychopathic, and he talked about death and life constantly. So I begin to wonder with some of the writings of the Zodiac whether he was quite literary. Also Gilbert and Sullivan. He actually had memorized. One of the things he had written was from a Gilbert and Sullivan play, and Gilbert and Sullivan, they have very fanciful words in that particular show. And so when somebody gave a speech, let me see if I can remember which one it was. Let me check it out here. Can't remember which one it was. The Mikado. It was the Mikado. If anybody's been to Gilbert and Sullivan, it's very clever, fancy, poetic wording. What the people would sing or give the speeches to. He knew that by heart. Who does that? Who knows Gilbert and Sullivan? Most guys who are your little low-life critters have no clue about Gilbert and Sullivan at all. They're never going to see one of their plays, the musicals. They're not going to see that stuff. Why would he know that? And so I look at the Most Dangerous Game, and I look at that Mikado thing, Gilbert and Sullivan, they put in his writing, and I wonder if this guy is not understanding literary stuff. Also, the Gold Bug, which is Edgar Allan Poe, has that whole cryptogram thing that has no spaces in it. Is he well-read? Is he actually a well-read person? And who would be a well-read person? Perhaps a teacher who teaches children these different things, and he studied it in college. So I personally think the Zodiac is very smart. I do think he has read enough literature, but I also think he's got this other side, which is that more emotional, angry side, and maybe more childlike. And maybe when he writes his crap and makes these ridiculous little cards he sent with Halloween stuff and all that, and makes the claims about paradise, is that the other side of him that's more childish? And then he incorporates inability to write properly and throw in misspellings like a child would, like he knows a child would. That just makes me wonder. So I question that. Now let's get to one of the big things about this guy. He had this watch. He had the Zodiac watch. Fascinating to me. So it has the sign and it has Zodiac. And here's something I'm going to tell you about how people figure stuff out. You're sitting there with your watch on your hand. Well, see, if it were him, he'd probably have it on his right hand. He's writing with his left. He's sitting there holding the paper. He's writing. He says, I should come up with a new name, a name for myself. I need something spectacular. I got to come up with a symbols and a name. I got to come up with, like a Superman thing. Oh, look. I could call myself Zodiac. I could use that symbol. Now, does that seem simplified? Sure, it does. But that is often how a serial killer would think, or a psychopath would think. Even us, if we had to come up with a name in a heartbeat, would we go back into, let's see, should I go into horoscope things? Should I do this? What about, or would we just go, oh man, I could just call myself that? The watch to me is one of the biggest signs that it could be Alan, because it's so basic and so easy to just come up with it, because his first letters did not have that name in it. And then suddenly they did. This is the Zodiac speaking. And there's my symbol. Do I think Alan's a great suspect? Yes, I do. I do think he's a great suspect. Hold on one second. My daughter just says, do I want to go with her to a soccer game? When are you leaving? Sorry. I have to go to the soccer game. That's why I did this early. So I'm going to finish up the show and probably take a ride with her, so I don't have to ride all the way there by myself. So I think Alan has the personality. He has this guy who made all these claims about him, by the way. He's quite a character. Some people think he's actually the Zodiac because he said some things. He's in the little link that I'm putting below for the about Alan. But he is he's a character. It is this fella. This fella here. His name is what is his name? Don Chaney, and he's the one that gave a lot of information about Alan, about what he was saying about he was into the dangerous game. He was into preferring to kill people. He came up with the Zodiac thing. It's hard to tell if he knows some things and thinks he's creepy, and other people do express similar things who knew Alan as well. So he's not the only one who thinks he's creepy. There are more people who think that Alan said these things and are creepy. He's the big guy. Now, he also could be an attention seeker. So he could be adding stuff to his friend's background before he said he wasn't a friend anymore because he creeped him out too much. But he also said this, which I thought was fascinating. He asked him, do you think the possibility exists that Zodiac was not Arthur Lee Allen? How do I say Arthur Lee Allen. And Don Chaney says, I've thought about that from time to time, and I don't see any way that it could not be Arthur Lee Allen. If it was not him, it had to be somebody that looked like him and was a close friend of his, somebody that maybe they conspired together, or that he talked to the way he talked to me. Wait a minute. Aren't you kind of saying you could be the guy that actually is Zodiac? Somebody that could have quoted the quote. I don't know which quote that was. So he's basically saying that if it isn't Alan, that Alan either didn't act alone and he had help, which I don't believe, or Alan had a friend like him who could basically pin it on Alan and pretend Alan did it when actually he did it because he looks just enough like Alan. And he's an engineer, so he's not a dummy. So some people think Don Chaney did it. Now, Don Chaney, again, no fingerprints matching, no DNA matching, and his handwriting doesn't match either. So we're still back there with that. Okay. So see how confusing all of this is? I'm going to wrap this up because I've got a soccer game to go to. But do I think John Chaney did it? I don't have any evidence he did. I think he's just a blowhard, and he likes to add extra information to stories about his friend, right? But Alan, in my opinion, is still number one suspect. There's no question he had a problem with his mother. He had multiple residences he could work in alone. He wasn't married. He had trouble getting along with jobs. He got fired from jobs. He did molest a kid. He was put in a mental institution. He's supposedly is brilliant, has an IQ of 135. He has access. He's been in the Navy. He's supposedly can do, somewhere I read that he has ability to do coding. He had the watch, which says Zodiac, and his mother gave him that watch, and it's, so that's interesting. It's a very special watch from Mommy. And he's been in a number of those locations. He has the knives, he has the guns. And does he look exactly like this particular version? No, he looks more like this version with what Benny says it could be scuba thing. Is Alan the best suspect? Still, yes. Can we prove it? Heck no. Heck no. And are we ever going to prove it? No, because I think the DNA is garbage. fingerprints are questionable. So we have zero physical evidence. And most of the suspects are probably dead by now. So unless somebody uncovers, like finally finds some vault someplace where he put all kinds of stuff in, and you actually find that proof that this guy did it in that vault, we're never going to know. So am I going to write a book? No. Am I going to do a show, a series? No. Am I going to go down any more rabbit holes? No, I'm not, because it's not worth the effort. Because all I can say is he was the most unique serial killer I've ever run into. He was more like a mass murderer. He had this very split thing of being brilliant and being kind of strangely childish and little vindictive games that he liked to play. His writing should have been brilliant because he's got a high IQ, but he's writing like with misspellings like a child from an elementary school. He loves attention. This guy was an attention seeker. There's no question about that. And he has a lot of things that he is the most circumstantially correct suspect of all of them. Absolutely, hands down, in my opinion. But we'll never prove he did it. And the handwriting thing is a problem unless he had some very clever way of disguising handwriting or using some machines to do so. And we can speculate on that until the cows come home, and we're never going to know. Absolutely are not going to know. So it's a weird case, and that's all I can say. It was a very hard case to even try to even look into because there's so much. And if I wanted to do this show properly and not all the screw ups I had in it, I would literally have to spend months and months putting this together and edit the living crap out of it because it's just very difficult it's a very difficult case. I mean, to even figure out who could have done it. But I'm going to stick with this guy as a number one suspect, but I still cannot say he did it. So I'll just put here. Oh, Benny, maybe he was writing in children's spelling to be derogatory to the children he has to put up with while trying to teach them proper English. And yet they keep making those spelling mistakes. Yeah, he totally loved children, but in what way? And he got fired, so he couldn't work in the schools. He supposedly liked working with kids because they're easy to push around and control and all that kind of stuff. But maybe he also had resentment. Like if he was the Zodiac and he said, could shoot all the little kiddies as they come off the bus. He had a lot of references, by the way. He called girls, he used the word girl and boy. The Zodiac used girl and boy a lot, and kiddies. Focus on young youth as opposed to saying young woman, young man, or a male or female. He'd go girl, boy, kiddies. You'd kind of wonder why he's got this childlike focus on people. So I think that's interesting. Lila says a repeated use of a flashlight, even secured to a firearm. Many misdirects on words. Could Zodiac possibly have be a play on Kodiak flashlight? That's interesting, but I doubt it. Yeah. That's interesting. I've heard mentioned a few times the side of the brain that is used regards to something pertaining to the propensity to psychopathy. I've never kind of bought any of that crap as far as the brain goes myself. The Zodiac boot issue. Yes. Oh, boats. Sorry, not the boots. The Zodiac boats. Yeah. Could he have gotten it from there? See, this is what Kim Rossmo was saying. You could literally just do this with strings to every single point, and you could drive yourself absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. So, yeah. Lila says, I own a mail order business. I totally agree on the stamp thing. The DNA could be from a sponge. Different people got to handle a sponge. Could be that, but it could have just been on the envelope before the stamp went on it. So it's crap. The DNA is crap. Everything's crap. They got nothing physically, in my opinion. So it is all going to be circumstantial, and all we can do is say he seems more. But again, the handwriting is a number one sticky wicket, I would say. That's what I think. So that's where I leave. I'll leave it with that because I got to go watch my granddaughter play her last 2 soccer games. I tried to put this early enough, and I was planning to drive there myself, but apparently my daughter's now offered me a ride, so I'm going to take it because it's a 45-minute drive down there, and I don't feel like it. So, all righty. So thank you for being here. I know the show is a little bit confusing, but this whole thing is so confusing. It's so hard to get through in a 1 hour, 2 hour show. You know what I mean? So, but thank you for putting up with me. And I still don't know where those pictures went to. Darn it. Okay. I'll see you next time. Bye.